George Bruno for the 21 Report. We're at the 21 Convention, the Patriarch Edition in Orlando, Florida, 2019, and I'm talking with Rich Graham. Welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Well, I understand you have quite a pedigree.
I guess.
Yeah.
A little bit.
That's what I've heard, and that's why you're here. You served our country, didn't you?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
In 2000, after high school, I went into the Navy and served for 6.5 years in the SEAL teams. And then after some medical conditions, I found my way out of the military. And since then, I've been working with civilians and law enforcement, doing security training and consulting around the country in Central South America. Nice.
What is the reason for security and safety training?
Well, I mean, it's a dangerous world we live in. And not to be paranoid, but to be prepared. So working with different SWAT teams and special tactics teams for counterterrorism, active shooter response, just building skill sets and tactics, and then sharing some of those lessons learned or how that translates into helping assist a family protect their loved ones or themselves. Just bringing in the realistic expectation of the response time of law enforcement. So to empower the individual, to empower our law enforcement, and help us fight and protect ourselves.
So do you have a narrative or kind of like a little thing running in your head when you watch on TV where there's active shooter situations? I mean, are you kind of analyzing as if you are there when you watch these things on TV?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of patterns and there's a lot of there's lessons to be learned. So, I mean, in the SEAL teams, and I'm sure other military units have this too, but whenever something bad would happen, we'd always go back and reassess why did that happen the way it did. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the laws or the rules that we have in place, we call them their lessons written in blood. And the goal is to not let that repeat itself. So there's many times where we look at these different attacks that happen around the country and you see consistent themes, or you see something new, and then basically taking that information, it helps us develop strategies that we hope we can avoid that or react differently to better predict and prepare for those types of attacks.
Mm-hmm. Do you find yourself, let's say you're training with a police department, mm-hmm. Does your training go above and beyond, obviously, what they learn in the academy, of course?
Yeah, normally we come in and build off of what they've learned in the academy. So the academy, not to take anything away from the academy, but the academy is a baseline. That's the lowest common denominator of training they should ever receive because it's their first training they're receiving. Mm-hmm. Everything from there, we're building on it. Mm-hmm. So many times as we come in and we're working with people who are already police officers, and then we're taking their skills and their tactics to the next level, introducing new things and new experiences to them.
So scenarios have profiles, just the way suspects do.
Yeah.
Do they fall into categories where you think are fairly predictable?
It depends. So different training, it will be predictable based on what is it that we're trying to achieve. So, I mean, you can set up any scenario you want and win because you know the layout of what the scenario is, so you can set traps. So the goal in setting up scenarios isn't necessarily to beat the officers, it's to give them the opportunity to challenge the things that they would normally do on a static shooting range and now get to come in and have other moving parts that they have to process information, make reaction, judgment calls and choices, and move through. And there's times where they still lose because they're learning, but then again, you debrief, you reset it up, you do it again and get it to a point where at the end you want them to win, you know what I mean? Because the goal isn't to beat them in the training, in the scenarios. The goal is to give them the opportunity to learn more and advance their skills or to test those skills under stress.
I see. Did you learn all this while serving our country?
I learned a lot from serving the country. I learned a lot from my time in the SEAL teams, but there's been, from being a martial artist for years, from being a personal trainer, from being a Navy SEAL, taking that information. I can't come to a law enforcement department and teach them what I taught or what I learned in the SEALs because it's different. Right. And I can't come teach you how to protect your family based on what I learned in the SEALs. Right. Because you don't have night vision, You don't have 16 other guys who have the same training level as you. You can't call in airstrikes. There's all these things that you don't have access to, and neither do the police.
Right.
The enemy is different. The battlefield is different.
Right.
So basically, we just have to be thinkers. And we go, based on what I know and understand, and based on what I understand of the current threat that this particular group, whether it's the family, whether it's law enforcement, and that could change in different areas around the country. That could change when I'm training here versus Central or South America. You know what I mean? But then we just take that and you go, what does this department, what do these officers, what does this family need? And then how do I connect the dots based on the knowledge that I have and the background that I have and the understanding, and then basically set the training up so it is most valuable for them where they're at currently based on what it is that the need is.
Mm-hmm. Communication is a big part of what happens, isn't it?
Yes. Communication's huge.
And everyone is in the loop electronically when these scenarios take place. So is everybody on the same frequency as far as radio is concerned? Can everyone hear all the orders that are happening when these scenarios take place, when law enforcement goes into a shooter situation? Or are there certain people that are on frequencies that they can speak with individually? What have you discovered about that?
The part of that's regional. So every part of the country has different communication systems. Some parts of the country or certain regions within a state, a local community have an emergency frequency they can turn to so that everyone's on the same page, firefighters, EMS, and police officers, or different police officers, SWAT teams, and all that stuff. Other regions, they don't do it that way. So it's not necessarily a yes or no answer. That just depends. Yeah.
I'm thinking about our audience right now. So let's kind of switch gears here. Safety for the average, if there's such thing as an average American citizen, what is the most important thing about safety and security for the average American citizen?
So it's a good question to put into one thing, but being prepared and having situational awareness and having an understanding that these types of things can happen, you know what I mean? And we should be prepared and we should not have an expectation that it's going to happen to where we're paranoid, but we shouldn't be naive to the fact that it can't. Because I can guarantee you, all the people who find themselves in these active shooter style attacks, because just on the topic that we're talking about right now, none of them were expecting it to happen, and then all of a sudden there they were.
It could be a school day, it could be a concert, it could be a city street.
And the bad guy will always have the advantage because they're picking the time and place of when the attack happens and we're not ready for it. And normally it's going to happen in a situation or a time frame when we least expect it, which makes us vulnerable, right? And now we have to, one of the biggest things when we do our active shooter training, one of the first parts of the way I teach active shooter response for the civilian is we have to accept reality, right? And why this is so crucial is in the beginning, you always hear people talk about, yeah, man, you go into fight or flight, but there's something before fight or flight, there's a third F, and that's freeze. There's time that we take to process information and we go into shock, right? And when we go into that mental freeze, right, we're processing, is this really happening? Because when something happens out of the normal that we're not used to, like this shouldn't happen in this environment, so my brain doesn't accept the fact that this is actually happening, which causes me to freeze and try to process that, kind of like a deer in the headlights, right? Well, I need to go into, and I'm not saying fight or flight is the right response. That's what we refer to it as. I break it down in a different way. But the accepting reality phase is extremely important because I need to make a decision. And what I decide is going to be based on the situation. I can't tell you what that decision is going to be. You have a million different answers for a million different scenarios, you know what I mean? But to accept the reality and then to break out of shock. If you can recognize that you're going into this like mental hold, I need to break out of it and I need to make a decision and go with it. Whether it's right or wrong, I need to go with it, right? Because the worst thing I can do is stay stationary, right? Because these attacks happen so fast. And one of the things that we find when we go into shock like this is many times we try to talk or negotiate ourselves out of it because we don't know what to do. Like, no, don't, right? Like that's a shock. That's a one of these freeze responses. It's your brain trying to go, I need time to process, right? But there is no negotiation here. It's a different type of attack. So unlike if I wanted your cell phone or if I wanted your wallet, I make my demands. I say, give me your wallet, give me your phone, or I will, whatever my threat is. And now I give you opportunity to respond. We're having a negotiation here. I'm on the winning end of this negotiation at this point because I'm probably threatening you with something. But now you have a time to go, whoa, man, easy, whatever you want. I'll give you, you don't need to stab me over this. I'll give you my phone. You want my wallet, right? So now that what this does is this buys us time. In an active shooter style attack, time is not on our side. Most of these attacks happen in less than 2 minutes, right? And the other thing that's dangerous with this is the average law enforcement response is over 7 minutes. So if you look at the gap between, well, is it up to me or are the police saving me, right? It's up to me or it's up to us, right? So one of the main things is not being paranoid with our life that we're afraid to go to the mall or we don't go to the movie theater or anything like that anymore. But at the same time, when I go out, I need to be situationally aware and be paying attention that when I'm in a place that has a lot of people, this is a reality currently that one of these things may happen, whether it's with a vehicle, whether it's with a knife, a gun, we don't know. A bomb you can't really do much about, right? But if I see something that looks like it, I need to accept that this is a high likelihood that this is what's happening. And if I overreact, I have to be okay with it and not be so caught up on, I don't want to overreact because I don't want to be embarrassed and look like an idiot. You know, I'm like, oh, dude, he freaked out. He's paranoid, PTSD or whatever. You know what I mean? So we want to react accordingly, make a strong decision, make it fast. And if we overreacted, cool, we can throttle it back. But at the same time, one of the most dangerous things is to pretend like it's not happening, get caught in shock, try to negotiate with a person who didn't come to negotiate. Because the goal of an active shooter attack is to create as much chaos as possible, right? To move their agenda or to make a statement, right? So the only thing that I have for them is my life. You know what I mean? So there's nothing I'm handing them, so I have no negotiation tools.
Do you ever study conspiracy theories about situations, you know, kind of like Monday morning quarterbacking? I know after the Vegas thing, there was just so many things.
Yeah. There's a lot to learn in Las Vegas. There's a lot to learn in Las Vegas from... There's things that I watched that video that didn't make sense to me. Like, I know a lot about firearms. I work in the industry. It didn't sound, to me personally, not to get into conspiracy theory stuff, but it didn't sound like a bump stock to me. Right? And a bump stock, to do that kind of thing, it doesn't make sense. There's other things that don't make sense where I don't know why, if you were to do that, it's faster and more simple to have more magazines for the same type of gun than it is to try, like if I was going to try to sneak in and shoot up a whole courtyard of people, it's easier for me to sneak in a gun or two and a whole bunch of magazines because they're small and I could put them in multiple suitcases or bags and bring them into an area than to try to bring in, 15, 20, 30 guns, whatever it was. And then all the ammo. So if I have different types of guns, then I have to bring in different types of caliber ammo and I have to load up different types of caliber magazines. And then when I'm in the middle of shooting that gun and I go to do a magazine change, I'm looking array of different caliber magazines to choose from, but I have to choose the right one for the particular gun I'm shooting. So from that standpoint, it doesn't really make sense. And the guy could have been stupid as far as his competency is choosing that or his design, but it doesn't seem like he was. So from that standpoint, there's certain things that I look at and I go,
A lot of things didn't add up.
Well, I don't know why you would do it like that.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't make sense from an attack standpoint to do it like that. You're making your job harder.
Yeah.
And, there's no point in getting a bump stock, because if you're going to go do something like that, it's just as easy to get something that's full auto.
Right. Gunshots in public don't necessarily sound like gunshots, do they? I always hear witnesses saying they thought there was firecrackers going off.
Yeah.
And they're in like this disbelief, just thinking somebody set off a pack of firecrackers.
Yeah.
Guns don't sound like they sound in a movie.
Well, that's the thing. So guns don't sound like they sound in the movies, right? They don't sound like what they sound on the speakers coming out of your TV, right? So when we do shoot a gun, what are we normally wearing? Ear protection, right?
Yeah.
So if you've never actually been around gunfire without ear protection on, you don't really have a true understanding of what a gun sounds like.
Right.
Right? The other thing that happens in an urban environment that we have to be aware of, and this is one of the things that we teach in our active shooter classes, is when you're in an urban environment, so let's say I'm in an alleyway, right, like this, and we have someone who's shooting over here, and this is a wall of a building. The sound waves get muffled by this wall of the building. But this wall is open line, and the sound hits this wall and actually echoes back. So when you're standing in this alleyway here, and someone's shooting a gun here, it sounds as if the gunshots are coming from this direction. So when they teach run, hide, fight, my problem with run, hide, fight is when I say run, that doesn't spark you to think. You just react and go. There's no thought process to it. And when we pressure test this, with blank guns or simunitions and things like that, what we see is the majority of the people who just go, run, without thinking, they run away from the sound of the gunshots. But in an urban environment, you have to be very careful because of the echoing, right? And how the sound works in that type of environment. Most of the people will run around the corner straight into the bad guy. And then as the first couple people are getting shot, the next wave of people who try to turn around, the last people coming around the corner are pushing into them, and the people can't turn around and run back because the people in the back can't see that the shooter is actually over there. And what happens is the crowd actually runs into the shooter.
Interesting.
So urban environments are tricky, and that's one of the things that made it so confusing in Las Vegas for the people who were on the ground, is the way the sound was echoing off the buildings. People were saying that they think there's multiple shooters. I don't know if there was or there wasn't. I don't have that information. But I do know in an urban environment like that, the echoes can play very big tricks on you.
I've been in canyons where I've yelled, and then like a split second later, you hear your voice kind of coming back at you. So I could imagine what gunfire sounds like.
Yep.
Interesting, very interesting. And also, too, if you're in your car driving and let's say you hear a siren, ambulance, police, fire truck, you're looking in all your mirrors because you don't know where it's coming from.
Yep.
And that's kind of confusing.
Yep. So that's one of the things that we talk about, is it's extremely important to locate our threat. And locating the threat is one of the first things that we're going to do, right? Without taking the action plan out of order. But one of the key elements is to locate the threat, because I don't know where to run. I don't know where to hide. I don't know how to fight. I can't really make any logical decisions on how to navigate this situation if I don't understand where the threat is coming from.
Gather information.
And then once I locate it, then I can identify, well, what is the threat? I might be looking at exits, but just like in this diagram, I might locate the exit, right? But if I haven't located the threat, my exit might take me to the threat. So I need to locate, identify, and then once I have that information, then I can move. I'm not saying we stand still just doing this until it happens. Like, I can create some movement so I'm not a stationary target, but these are the things that we're trying to gather so that we can make strategic decisions that will increase the odds of survival. Yeah.
Well, I just learned something here today, and that I've always heard the fight or flight thing was the first thing, but you say the freeze. People just stop and go into that shock mode.
Yep. That'll be the first thing you do, because that's the time you're processing information. Because you're going to make a judgment call based on life. Like, do you think you will win if I fight? Then you're like, I'm going to fight.
Yeah.
If I'm like, there's no way I'm winning this, then you're going to run.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But there's a time frame that you have, that you're processing, you're weighing out the odds. Well, I could do this, I could do that. This happens, well, this happens, right? And it can happen really fast, right? But if you have no reference or experience in this particular field, right, then it takes time. It's like walking into a new airport. I might be in airports all the time, but I walk into a new airport and I walk out of the gate and I'm kind of standing there like looking around like, where do I go? And I'm trying to look in areas where the signs normally are, but maybe I just flew into a different country and they put their signs in different places. And then I'm trying to find words that look similar, right? So I'm in a new environment, in a new situation, and I don't just move right out to head toward baggage claim, right? Because I don't know the direction to where baggage claim is. So there's a time frame where I'm trying to process information. Maybe that's a bad example, right? But if I'm not used to being in a situation that I need to fight or defend myself, or someone's trying to attack me, or, the situation seems like it's going bad, there's all these things that start coming through your mind of, especially in a society where we're taught not to ruffle feathers. Everything's politically correct, right? So what happens with everything being politically correct and super sensitive, it's really like outlandish to be loud. You know what I mean? Like, if someone was coming up to you and they're making you feel uncomfortable, for you to yell at them, hey, stop, stand back, right? That's like, whoa, dude, chill out, man. Like, why are you yelling at that guy? He was just going to walk up and ask you for $5 or something like that. You don't have to yell at him. He was making me feel really uncomfortable, but it's like counterculture to just tell someone, stop, leave me alone, stand back, right? Because now you're kind of being a jerk. So in this process, you're like, oh, well, this is what I really want to say, but then maybe this is what I should do. Should I just walk around? Should I pretend like this not happened? Should I just not make eye contact and ignore him? Like, all these things are processing in your mind on how you want to react. And do you stand up to the dude and say, leave me alone? Or do you just try to get away? And that's on a simple scale. So when you take something that's super high stress, that's what we find ourselves is getting locked into this, taking in information in something that we've never seen before, right? And something that we don't want to accept is actually happening. Yeah. We're in disbelief. And there is a time of processing that information and then trying to figure out, well, what the hell do I do? And then, hopefully we make the best decision we can. But there's been a lot of people, if you watch the videos, who they don't know what to do. And there's another thing that we see a lot is people jumping on the ground. Mm-hmm. And you've heard from like the old school, like Vietnam era guys, they're like, if you hear gunshots, you get on the ground. Like, have you ever heard that? Right?
Yeah, get down.
Yeah, get down. Get down. Okay, yeah. Well, fair enough. Again, in the beginning, I said, I can't take what I learned in the SEAL teams and teach you exactly what I learned in the SEAL teams because it might not be relevant for your fight, okay? So if I want to do an active shooter attack and kill lots of people, the place I go is where lots of people are, right? So if I'm in an environment where there's lots of people, okay, one of the last places I want to be is on the ground.
Right.
Because if you take Las Vegas again, for example, almost half the people died by being trampled to death, not by being shot. Yeah. So does my body care whether I get shot and die or I get trampled to death and die? Like, my body's like, hey, dude, how about you just keep me alive? Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I'm not trying to armchair quarterback, but it's something to be aware of because we don't know what we don't know, and there's people who teach us things, or there's things that we've heard that we just go, oh, well, I guess that's what you do. Mm-hmm. So we have people who don't know what to do, and they just go, oh, get down, and they jump on the ground, and now they're getting run over. Mm-hmm. Well, if we were talking about trying to locate a threat, is it hard to, if I lay down in the middle of a crowd, how do I locate the threat? If I'm trying to identify, well, what is the threat? Who are they? Where are they moving? Right? I can't do that because I can't see anything. If my next step is to move and try to get to safety, if I want to fight, whatever it is that I want to do, now that I'm on the ground and people are stomping on me, it's very hard for me to move from that position. And I'm not saying we can never get on the ground, but in one of these types of environments for active shooter attack, that might be that needs to be a very calculated decision for me to commit myself to the ground in that type of environment, because the people around me are just as dangerous to me as the attacker is. It's like, do you know anything about ocean lifeguarding?
No.
So I grew up on the beach in New Jersey. When I was a lifeguard, the most dangerous thing in the ocean, right? People are scared of sharks, and they're scared of, crabs and eels and all sorts of little weird things in there, right? But the most dangerous thing in the ocean is the person you're trying to rescue, because they're going to climb on top of you and drown you while you're trying to rescue them.
I've heard that.
Yeah, and that's why you have that little red buoy, a little Baywatch buoy, right?
Yeah.
So you swim up and you stop like 5 yards away from them, and you pull the line up and you grab that buoy and you approach with caution, grab on, hold on, and you let them get onto that, and you let them hold on, and you give them a second to get on that thing. Then you come around behind them, and then you start to pull them in. Because if you come in first, the person you're trying to save is the one that kills you.
Right.
So in this concept of this active shooter attack, the people who are in fight or flight, right, they are just as likely to hurt me, right, as the person who I'm trying to get away from. So there's a lot going on in it, you know what I mean? And it's a very complex situation.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I know there's a lot of men out there watching this who have wives, girlfriends, and families, and your gears are turning about safety, about keeping yourself and your family and your loved ones safe. You learned a little bit today, and I would encourage you to do a little bit more research on this. How can people find you?
We have a website, and we actually have this active shooter response training. That we're just happen to be talking about it today. So on our website, fullspectrumwarrior.us, and you can look at that. You can join our online training membership, and we have active shooter response training there on our website for you to take advantage of.
I would do that if I were you. Thank you, Rich.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity.
And thank you for your service.
Thank you.